The beginning of the 9th generation of video game consoles is almost upon us.
Look, I don't mean to pick on TheGamer so much, but they're really making it way too easy for me.
2020 will see both the PS5 and the Xbox Series X finally release.
Allegedly. I still have my doubts.
But without any truly mind-blowingly next-gen games coming in the immediate future, it's easy to miss all the ways the next generation is going to change gaming forever.
I mean, don't we hear this, like, every console generation? Like, oh, there's no evidence of it yet, but don't worry, it's going to be the greatest thing ever. I mean, can we just wait until we see it in action, please? Why do people always get on my case for wanting to see the thing in action before saying it's going to be good or bad?
Sony's PlayStation 5 is a radical departure from their earlier consoles.
I mean, it's really not. It's a box that plays games and has some other stuff. It's really not that radical of a change.
And not just design, but with hardware in general. The PS5's high-power internals, from its CPU to its SSD to everything else, is going to change gaming in major ways.
Buzzwords. I'm just gonna skip ahead to when the video actually starts. The title of the video is 6 Things PS5 Will Change Forever. So strap in, because it's gonna be one of those.
Every console generation is more powerful than the last, sure, but the PS5 is a more massive change than you might think when it comes to world complexity.
Am I the only one who just isn't fazed by stuff like this anymore? Like, how many times are people going to get shafted by, oh, this console's so amazing, this console's so powerful, and then there's like no evidence of it, and it comes out, and it's kind of just like moderate advancement. I'm not at all doubting that it's going to be a pretty big jump up from the PS4 and the Xbox One, but those were super underpowered consoles. Being a step up from the 8th gen of consoles is not something to be super proud of. It's kind of something that we should have gotten already.
A game world can be more or less complicated depending on how many characters are on screen, how many systems are in the game, and how much detail is displayed. And that's just the start of the list. A more powerful CPU means more complex game worlds can be built.
I mean, not to nitpick here, but CPU isn't the be-all, end-all of that, and it's... Sorry, I'll just let him talk. I'll let him get his whole point out, and then we'll pick it apart.
But both the Xbox One and the PS4, and Xbox One X and PS4 Pro, have CPUs built on AMD's Jaguar microarchitecture. This style of chip is made to be low cost, low power, and easy to mass produce.
Kind of like the consoles as a whole, which is why they get themselves into these kinds of pitfalls. It's honestly the one reliable thing about them. They're not going to be very fancy. As much as they want to tell you they are fancy, they're only fancy in comparison to the last one.
It is most similar in specs and power to 2013-era tablets and notebooks.
Well, yes, because 2013 tech is when the 8th gen of consoles was being made. And also, it's worth noting that tablets actually have pretty good CPUs for something of that size. But yes, the 2013 consoles were built on 2013 hardware. Thank you for that.
The PS5 CPU is set to not only have a much higher frequency, but will also be a fully featured desktop-class Ryzen Zen 2 chip. Fundamentally, games will no longer be powered by 7+ years old mid-tier mobile tech, and instead by the very latest in PC technology.
Wait, the very latest in PC tech? The Zen 2 is not the latest in PC tech. It launched over a year ago. Recent, sure, but latest? No. And also you say, oh, the consoles are no longer going to be running on 7-year-old hardware. Okay, but it wasn't 7-year-old hardware when they were built. I could literally make this exact same argument about what you're saying right now in 7 years. Do you see the problem with that? Console hardware is static. And as much as the manufacturers want to tell you it's not like this, it is going to be cheap enough for them to mass produce, because that's the whole point. It's not this isn't an argument in favor of the new consoles as much as you want to make it sound like that. Oh, the consoles are being run on 7-year-old hardware. Yeah, okay, but now we're going into the new console generation with 1-year-old hardware. I swear, people keep trying to compare console hardware to PC hardware without noticing the very important difference there. PC hardware changes and evolves with time. Console hardware is locked in place for 7+ years. It doesn't matter how old it is now, it matters how well it's going to age.
If that jump in power sounds staggering, that's because it is.
It doesn't sound staggering. It sounds like you just saying ages of things. Like I could literally make that argument about anything.
It's a much bigger jump in power than the move from PS3 to PS4.
again, that's not really something to be proud of. The jump from PS3 to 4 wasn't super impressive.
Going forward, games can be exponentially more complex.
Assuming the devs actually make use of the hardware, and assuming the hardware is easy to develop on. Two things that are yet to be seen.
Entire genres of games that are particularly CPU intensive, like real-time strategy games, could find new homes on consoles.
Yeah, but do you really believe that's going to happen? I mean, I would like it to happen, but do you really believe RTS games are going to start getting big on consoles just because the CPUs are good now? Like, RTS games are on consoles now. People don't really play them there. It's just differences in the market. Because, have fun playing an RTS with a controller. Now, with keyboard and mouse support, yeah, maybe. And you guys know I don't really like the idea of exclusives. If the hardware is capable of running it, I see no reason why a game shouldn't go onto a certain platform. But, I mean, do you really think RTS games are going to break into the mainstream with the new generation? I just don't see that happening.
RPGs can be populated with many, many more NPCs, with far more complicated routines.
You just showed two. Again, maybe I'm nitpicking, but you were talking about more NPCs with more complicated routines, and you showed gameplay with no NPCs. Like maybe you could show a PC RPG with like an example of what you're talking about, of like really GPU intensive NPC activity, and no, okay. I keep forgetting that you guys don't make videos for people who actually know what you're talking about.
On the development side of things, games as complicated as the ones we're familiar with now will be easier than ever to build. Much less time will be needed to create and optimize engines able to take advantage of relatively low-powered hardware.
See, you were talking about the CPU and how that's going to affect game world, but then you were talking about how it's going to make things that are more complicated easier to build, and you're showing footage of things with just like nice mocap and good graphics. Was this a misconnection from the editor or what? These things, like the things you're talking about, don't actually line up with what's on screen. And I don't know if that's intentional or not.
What goes hand in hand with world complexity? World scale. For all of game development, you've had to choose between larger, more simple worlds or smaller, more complex worlds.
No?
This technical catch-22 has historically been a factor of streaming.
Wait, what? How is that? Wait, what? I need to hear that again.
For all of game development, you've had to choose between larger, more simple worlds or smaller, more complex worlds.
No. GTA 5, Witcher 3, Elder Scrolls, Fallout. These are big world games that are complex. Like literally, what are you talking about?
How quickly can a game load in data, and how quickly can the player traverse the world?
He was just talking about how there's no large-scale detailed games, and then showed footage of Red Dead 2. This is what I'm talking about. Was there a disconnect with the editor, or do you, legitimately not know what you're talking about? What is happening here?
Consoles these days usually read data from a disk or off of a physical hard drive.
Yes, those are the two ways a console can read content. Nice.
And those who've upgraded their consoles with an SSD should know the rest of the hardware inside. Even modern game consoles can't adequately take advantage of an SSD's speed in the same way a PC can.
Because the architecture of the hardware is different. Thank you.
This struggle has forced developers for decades to build games in certain ways, like devising winding, claustrophobic corridors that connect large open spaces, or conspicuously long elevator rides.
Okay, are you really about to imply that smaller scale linear games are because of no SSDs? Or long load times are because of no SSDs? I can find you plenty of games that are open world and are large scale and they load just fine. And then I can show you similarly scaled games that load really slowly. There's more at play here than just the hard drive type. There's more at play here than just the game scale. And going back to your title, 6 things PS5 will change forever, nothing of what you've been talking about here is actually new.
Also, the game can have a chance to load in new content without distracting the player.
Again, that's a practice that's been in gaming as long as I can remember. The game tries to anticipate where you're going to be and loads that in the background, so that way it doesn't have to load the whole world at once, and it can keep things seamless, but it can also make sure you don't see the loading times or you see the texture pop-ins. This has been around for a long time. Now, is this process improved with an SSD? Yeah, absolutely it is. But it's not exclusive to one.
This all changes for good with the next generation, as every PS5 will ship with an incredibly high-speed custom NVMe solid-state drive. The same can be said for the Xbox Series X, though its drive is a little different.
And both of these SSDs aren't the fastest around. They aren't going to stay the fastest around, even if they were the fastest around. Oh boy.
With this, for the first time, developers can count on not just ample high-speed storage, but can expect every single gamer to have access to that same storage.
How exactly is this going to affect game development, though? Like, genuinely, how is this going to affect things? Developers aren't shy about having long load times in their console games, and obviously developers have been developing for the PC for the longest time, where you never know if someone's going to have an SSD or an HDD. Like, genuinely, how is the addition of an SSD to a console going to radically change game development? I just don't... Like, you're bringing up two things. You're saying there's long load times and there's an SSD. You're not actually explaining how these things are connected to each other. And also, like, 30% of the stuff you're saying is either wrong or irrelevant. Like, why did you even bring game scale into this? Like, open world versus linear. I can show you a dozen linear games that have slow ass load times. I can show you a dozen open world games that have relatively fast load times.
Last generation gave us so many huge worlds, but imagine flying or riding through those worlds at high speeds, completely seamlessly.
Lego Marvel Superheroes did that really well, actually, on the 360. I'm not even memeing you. Lego Marvel Superheroes is such a good game.
Games on a fundamental level can change the speed and scope of traversal and exploration. No more loading.
No more loading. I hate when people say this. So SSD means no more loading. Yet no, that's not what it means. It just means faster loading. It doesn't mean no more loading.
And instantaneous resurrection after death is admittedly an awesome convenience to look forward to with the next generation.
Instantaneous resurrection after death. Like Halo 1? No?
But the scale of game worlds and how we navigate them will also change.
I mean, like, you're assuming that because the new consoles have an SSD, that automatically means we're going to get the biggest, largest, most detailed worlds ever. How do you know that? You don't know that.
With the launch of the Xbox 360 in 2005, the HD era began. For the past 15 years, games on consoles have been largely running in quote-unquote HD or 720p or full HD or 1080p. With the PS4 and Xbox One, 720p was mostly left behind.
No, it wasn't. 720p was not left behind with the Xbox One. Like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, do you research anything, or do you just look at buzzwords and find a way to connect them? 720p was not left behind with the Xbox One. Not even close.
And with the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X...
Okay, again, your editing is so bad. You said Xbox One X, and you showed an Xbox One S. Who is your editor? Get rid of them.
QHD or 1440p and Ultra HD or 4K became possible. The PS5 and Xbox Series X, though, will be the first consoles to set their standard resolutions above 1080p.
The standard resolution is not going to be above 1080p. 1080p will still be there. 1080p will still be what the vast majority of people are playing on. That will be the standard resolution. It can get higher than that, but the standard will be 1080p. Do you really think the majority of people who buy the next-gen consoles are going to be running 1440p or 4K TVs? No, they're going to be on 1080p.
While it's likely many developers will give gamers the choice between playing at a lower resolution and higher frame rate or a higher resolution and lower frame rate, 4K is very much going to be the expectation.
It really shouldn't be, though. Like, it really shouldn't be. We haven't even mastered 1080p on the current consoles. We haven't even mastered 60 FPS on the current consoles. Like, we should not be jumping to 4K this quickly.
This jump in resolution is much, much bigger than you think. From around 480p to 720p, i.e. the PS2 to PS3.
No, the PS3 and... Oh my god, the PS3 and 360 still ran a ton of games at 720p.
There's approximately double the pixels. When jumping from 720 to 1080p, i.e. the PS3 to PS4, there's approximately double the pixels.
No, you haven't... Do you think the PS4 and the Xbox One just flat run everything at 1080p? Because you're wrong. That's not how this works. The resolution is not locked into the hardware. It's in the game. And the hardware runs the game through the resolution in the game. Look at this like to dislike ratio. Why? Like, this is why I hate this channel, and this is why I pick on them quite often. Because they just they're just saying random things. They're just preaching to the choir of people who don't actually understand this. And that's how you get people making misinformed purchases.
Going from 1080p to 4K is a staggering 4 times increase in detail.
No, it's not technically a 4 times increase in detail. It's a 4 times increase in resolution. textures are going to scale with the resolution. If the textures are shit on 4K, it's still going to look shit. If I scale a 1080p game up to 4K, it's going to look like shit because the textures aren't scaling.
So even if you were less than blown away by the increase in resolution from the PS3 to PS4, or were unsatisfied with the Pro console's performance, the next console generation is sure to impress.
Okay, can we wait to say it's going to impress until we've actually seen it? Like, I don't want demo videos, I don't want demo streams, I want to see a live demonstration of this hardware that's allegedly coming out in less than 4 months. And they still haven't shown the prices.
And just as the Xbox 360 marked the beginning of the HD era, the PS5 and Xbox Series X will mark the beginning of the 4K era.
No, there's already 4K on the current console. It's not the beginning of an era.
The resolution at which games are likely to run far into the foreseeable future.
I'm literally just like bouncing my forehead off my mic. I can't stand this. This entire channel is just 10-minute videos of buzzwords. I hate it.
While we're waving goodbye to 1080p, don't take the PS5's 8K support too seriously. Very few, if any, games will run at actual 8K on the PS5.
How many of them are going to run at actual 4K? How many of them are going to run at 60 FPS? These are things we kind of need to know. They're things they're not really willing to tell us.
That'll be more the territory of the PS6, or the PS5 Pro, or Super Duper PS5, whatever they're gonna call it. Ray tracing, as a concept, has been around for a long time, but it's only become possible in the mainstream in recent years with NVIDIA's RTX line of graphics cards.
Yeah, it's not a PS5 hype train video without mentioning ray tracing, the thing that most people who talk about ray tracing can't actually describe.
To this day, the feature is rather niche, relegated mostly to PC gamers with high-end hardware. However, as both major consoles of the next generation offer hardware support for this feature, not only will more gamers get to experience ray tracing, but the feature itself will become more popular.
Okay, but what is ray tracing? Again, with the buzzwords, what is ray tracing?
And easier to implement over time as developers get more experienced with the tech. What ray tracing can accomplish, from ray-traced shadows to global illumination to reflections, is all very next-gen visually.
What ray tracing can achieve, like ray-traced shadows. Like, dude. But what is it? Do you know?
Often massively upgrading fidelity at a hefty performance cost. Though, when developing for console hardware, it's possible to do more with less and eke out better performance from a low-power part as compared to a more expensive, more powerful PC.
Again, oh my god, like, you're just spouting whatever. How does this even make sense? With a console, you can get better performance out of a weaker part than a more expensive, more powerful PC part. Trust me, guys, I know this. Like, no. Literally no. Jeez, like, how do people take this channel seriously?
So, ray tracing could very well turn out to be the secret sauce for the next generation.
No, it's not going to. I can tell you with a surety that ray tracing is not going to be the secret sauce that makes the next generation amazing. It's been on PC for a while. It's a thing. It's nice, but it's just a thing. It's not going to be the secret sauce. A shitty game with ray tracing is still a shitty game. And a game can be completely, absolutely gorgeous without ray tracing still.
The feature that games can show off to immediately differentiate themselves from older titles. Ray tracing can even radically change the entire visual aesthetic of a game.
I mean, not really?
Breathing new life into older titles like Minecraft. So updating older PS4 games with ray tracing support on the PS5 could create entirely unique experiences.
Again, can you please just explain what ray tracing is for your audience? Is it that difficult? Like, remember when you were in school and the teachers told you to define this word but don't use this word in the definition? They should just take this entire clip and show that to classrooms as an example of why you don't want to use the word of something in the definition of that word. It is completely unhelpful, it's completely uninformative, and it makes you sound like you don't actually know what you're talking about.
For the countless PC gamers without a latest generation RTX card, ray tracing will likely be easiest to appreciate on console.
It's actually not exclusive to new hardware. I have a GTX 1070 and I can do ray tracing.
Regardless, the 9th generation of gaming consoles is sure to usher in the era of ray tracing, and once it's arrived, there's no going back.
Another 3.5 minutes of this video. Let's go.
PC gamers have been living like high refresh rate kings for many years. 60 frames per second to PC gamers is just okay when monitors can support refresh rates as high as 360 Hz, as well as variable refresh rate technology like Nvidia's G-Sync and AMD's FreeSync.
But do you know the difference between frame rate and refresh rate? Because you're using them interchangeably. And I don't like where this is going.
But on console, 60 frames per second is the best you can get, and it's a rarity at that, with many games on PS4 struggling to maintain a rock-solid 30 FPS.
Oh hey, look, the problem with console hardware.
As a direct result of the beefy desktop-grade CPU in the PS5, high refresh rate gaming is going to be possible on consoles for the first time in history.
Okay, high refresh rate, yes. High frame rate? Because there's a difference, and based on early reports of AAA games on the new consoles, it doesn't look like there's going to be a big jump in frame rate, which is concerning. Again, frame rate and refresh rate are not interchangeable. They are similar and they are connected. They are not interchangeable.
Both the Xbox Series X and the PS5 will support refresh rates up to 120 Hz.
Up to, as in they're capable of getting up to that. Will they run at that all the time? Will they keep that all the time? Absolutely not. That's why they say up to that. The same way that they said the Xbox One X can get up to 4K 60. Does it actually go up to 4K 60? Rarely, but it can go up there. So yes, the new consoles can get up to 120 Hz. Are you actually going to be playing at 120 FPS on 120 Hz? I have my doubts.
It's important to note that while possible, relatively few games will make use of this feature.
Yeah, and the game that you were actually showing right there, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, 4K 30. Whoopee.
As the sacrifices and fidelity required to maintain refresh rates that high at a modern resolution are significant.
Okay, so is the new hardware super powerful or not? Is the new hardware super powerful or not? You were just talking about how 4K and ray tracing are going to be amazing, but now you're talking about high refresh rates, but you can't have the high refresh rates and the high frame rates with the high resolution and the ray tracing. Which is just wrong. But which one is it? You need to pick a lane. Is it powerful or is it not?
Single-player narrative experiences or massively multiplayer games are graphically expensive, but games meant for esports aren't.
What?
This is why Microsoft has announced Halo Infinite will support 120 FPS in multiplayer on console. The higher frame per second count will make the action much more fluid.
See, this is what I'm talking about. He said 120 hertz refresh rate, then he started talking about higher frames per second. Like I know the point you're making, but it's just irking me how much you're interchanging these two things.
And the competition fiercer.
Also, I want to point out that the Halo Infinite gameplay reveal was running at 60, so there's still no proof that we're actually going to hold 120.
While the single-player experience will run at a lower frame rate to compensate for more varied and impressive visuals.
Varied and impressive visuals is what he says when this is on screen. Get a new editor.
Competitive gaming on consoles can and will become much more popular if the games themselves are much easier to control.
I mean, the games have to be good and the games have to be competitive. If the games are easy to control, it doesn't mean it's going to be a popular esport.
And players can react more quickly, and multiplayer games built for competition are likely good candidates for 120 FPS support.
Sorry, I paused the video to make a point, and then I kind of just spaced out. Sorry.
If games offer both 120 FPS support and support for mouse and keyboard input, which may be possible on the next generation, even hardcore PC gamers would have trouble seeing what's worse about the console experience.
Yeah. Yeah, you figured me out, bro. You figured me out. If the PS5 has 120 hertz and mouse and keyboard support, I'm not even going to be able to tell the difference. Who is this video for? I have serious trouble believing that your audience is actually organic. 1.7 thousand likes to 53 dislikes. You don't know what you're talking about. How did this happen?
The last thing you might expect the PS5 and Xbox Series X to change is PC gaming.
Oh boy, I can't wait for this.
But you'd be wrong. Over the next couple of years, the next generation of consoles are going to radically change how games are developed and played on PC.
No. No, like they're just not. They didn't radically change the way things were developed when the 360 came out, or when the PS4 came out, or when the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X came out. It's not. Just stop.
You see, with the hardware inside the box of the PS5, Sony's PlayStation is more similar than ever to a PC.
God, it's really not, though. It's the same layout as a PS4, but they're separating the GPU and the CPU instead of using a hybrid. That's the only major difference. And then the SSD. I mean, it's the same hardware that it's always been. It's just instead of it being a CPU-GPU hybrid, they're separating the GPU and the CPU, and they're throwing an SSD in there instead of a regular hard drive. That's it. How is that more similar to a PC? It's literally just the old console, but with a couple things changed. And yeah, and again, this is a point that I made in my last video. In the most literal sense, sure, it's similar to a PC, but only in the most literal physical sense. In terms of actual capabilities of the software, of the hardware, of the peripherals, of the accessibility of everything else, no, it's not. It's not a PC. That's like saying a DVD player is a PC. No.
In terms of both power and design, from the CPU to GPU to the SSD to hardware accelerated ray tracing and even the size and design of the box itself.
Okay, hardware accelerated ray tracing, that's not something that's in the console. This is what I'm talking about. Ray tracing isn't in the console, it's in the game. This is what I'm talking about. Like the ray tracing isn't something that's in the hardware, it's something that's in the game. As long as the hardware can handle it, and as long as the drivers and the CPU and GPU can handle it. Oh my god.
The PS5 is more PC than ever. This is unprecedented in gaming, there traditionally being an ever-growing gulf between console and PC power. While high-end PCs today will still be far more powerful than a PS5,
mid-level PCs will be more powerful than a PS5.
As games are designed and built to take advantage of a much more modern PC-like hardware setup when it comes to consoles, games will run better on PC.
The hardware of the PS5 and the Xbox One X are going to stay static for years and years and years while PC hardware continues to come out and grow. Stop making this argument. Consoles literally change nothing about the PC hardware and the PC ecosystem. Just stop. We've heard this a million times.
And PC gamers will get all the next console generation upgrades on their pre-existing hardware, at resolutions and frame rates of their choosing. This will be doubly true for features like ray tracing, where the dedicated technology inside an RTX card will be much more powerful than the hardware-accelerated ray tracing on the PS5, so multi-platform games with ray tracing support will likely look and perform far better on PC than their console counterparts.
Okay, so I go back to what I said like a minute ago. Is the PS5 powerful or is it not? I mean, in the beginning of this video, you said that the PS5 was going to have state-of-the-art modern PC hardware. Do you know when ray tracing and RTX cards came out? Are the next-gen consoles super powerful on modern PC hardware, or are they not? You have to pick a lane.
Change will come slowly, over time, but the generations of bad PC ports are coming to an end.
Yeah, the era of bad PC ports. That was when exactly?
Finally, as the line between console gamer and PC gamer becomes even blurrier, and developers have to devote fewer resources to building a game for any one specific platform.
Yeah, the line between PC and console are going to get so blurry. Tell me that when the consoles have open marketplaces, multiple marketplaces, key marketplaces, multiple monitors, better multitasking, bigger indie marketplaces, free online, multiple messaging services, or they let you file your taxes on them. This is so stupid. I hate this. There's another 19 seconds of the video. I'm not even going to give them the courtesy of finishing it. The PS5 isn't out yet. We haven't even seen it fully in action. We haven't seen the Xbox One X fully in action. The big Halo reveal that was supposed to show the Xbox One X fully in action, or Series X, these names are so stupid. It was running on a PC. So, we don't know anything major or concrete about the new consoles. It'd be great if you stopped. Thanks.